Welcome to this video about the CAE C1 essay writing task. In this video, we will look at a sample question that has been on a previous CAE test. We will look at an example of a good essay answer for that. And finally, we will look at the grading and help you to understand why this response was a good answer or a good essay. So let's begin by looking at the sample question. Now this one, you can find this in your Cambridge materials. This one comes from an exam a few years ago. I will read it out to you, but of course, you are welcome to read this through on your own, and you can skip this part of the video if you would like. So this says, you must answer this question. So again, a reminder that in the CAE exam, there are two writing components. One is a mandatory essay, and then the other one, you have a choice of the writing format you will write in. Now it says your answer must be 220 to 260 words and in an appropriate style. Previously, we had discussed that in the CAE essay questions, you were often presented the idea that you have attended something or watched something. There's been a class discussion, and perhaps you have watched a documentary. And the idea is that you have had some kind of input, and now you need to talk about that experience, and you need to bring some of your own ideas. So in this example, it says, your class has attended a panel discussion on facilities, which should receive money from local authorities. You have made the notes below. So the setup here is you've attended a panel discussion, which is basically where there are a few people speaking who are experts, and they've talked about what facilities should receive money from the local authorities. Authorities in this case, most likely meaning the local government. And here are the notes that you supposedly made during this panel discussion. We've got one box that says which facilities should receive money from local authorities, and they've given us three answers essentially: museums, sports centers, and public gardens. And for some reason, you have also included notes about some of the opinions that were expressed during the discussion. And they were that museums aren't popular with everybody, sports centers mean healthier people, and a town needs green spaces. Parks are great for everybody. Now here comes the really important part. When you are writing your essay, look at this instruction part where they're telling you exactly what to do. And now in this example, they've kind of bolded the key words, but when you're writing your essay, there's a chance the important words aren't bolded. So I would go through and highlight the most important words to make sure you are doing what they have asked you to do in the task. Now here it says, write an essay discussing two of the facilities in your notes. So obviously do not address all three. Don't talk about museums, sports centers, and public gardens. Just talk about two of them. You should explain which facility it is that is more important for local authorities to give money to. So don't try to be diplomatic and say both of them should get funding. You need to pick one of them that is most important, and then give reasons to support your answer. It says you may, if you wish, make use of the opinions expressed in the discussion, but you should use your own words as far as possible. So again, one of the differences between the CAE, which is what we're doing here, and the CPE is, in the CPE, the C2 exam, they give you two texts you have to read, and you have to summarize the ideas and be able to analyze them and put them into your own words. Here in the CAE, they're kind of giving you like the guideline or the playground, and it's kind of up to you here to bring the ideas. Now they've set you up. They're talking about the facilities you need to talk about, and they're talking about some of the opinions expressed during the discussion, but ultimately it's you in the CAE who needs to come up with the ideas that are going to fill up the essay. So what ideas are those? Well, your ideas about two facilities, your ideas, so you get the choice of which of the facilities. You have to bring your ideas to explain which facility is most important, and you have to bring your own ideas to give reasons to support your answer. So that's what we're essentially looking for. Someone who is bringing forth two facilities, explaining which out of those two is better, and then giving reasons to support your answer. So there's the task. Let's now move to looking at a really good example, at least according to the Cambridge experts. I will read this. If you don't want me to read it and you would prefer to just read it on your own, you're welcome to skip this part of the video. Just skim through until the essay disappears from the video. It'll probably take me about 2 minutes to read through this. In regard of a recent discussion about the facilities which are financially supported by local authorities, I would like to write a few of my personal thoughts. Whether we are talking about sports centers or public gardens, there is no doubt that they are both a good thing to have in the city and should be supported somehow. The only question then is which of these is more important? What are the pros and cons of each one? Let me start with the sports centers, as I think these are a bit more problematic. Obviously, in our times, where lots of people spend days sitting in their office staring at a computer, training is very important. We have to balance that shift in our lifestyles. The problem is activities that you can do at these days. There is almost countless list of either individual or team sports that we can think of, and each center is usually designed for a specific type, or at least a group of sports similar in its nature. Therefore, I think that it is too different for them equally, and we can't say which activity is better than the others either. Another reason for not financing sports as much as green parks is their commercial use. What I mean by that is that we usually pay for everything the center offers to do, and therefore they are more able to last from their own money than gardens. Regarding of the green spaces, the situation here, I think. Every city needs gardens where people can sit and relax, but nobody is going to pay a tax for just walking around. These factors lead me to my conclusion that the public gardens are definitely a facility which should be financed from public money, whereas in the case of sports centers, the situation is questionable. Now, what are your initial thoughts hearing this? This is an example of a candidate who wrote this, where they actually did quite well according to the Cambridge people. Two things kind of jump out at me before we go into the details. You probably heard there were a few grammatic errors in there. I didn't correct them as I read them. I tried to read them so you could hear what was actually written by the student. And second of all, if you actually look at this, that second paragraph is massive and it's basically just dissing off or explaining why we shouldn't invest in the sports centers, whereas that third paragraph, if you call it that, or 2 sentences for that matter, is very short and to me doesn't give a ton of information. But I hope that this maybe allows you to relax a little bit to see that, yes, you can make some errors. Obviously, we want to make as few as possible. But, this is an example that the student would have successfully passed the writing portion on their CAE. So let's now take a look section by section at how the Cambridge examiners broke this piece down. So we're going to look at the content, communicative achievement, organization, and language. And a reminder, those 4 things, those 4 criteria, those are used for every piece of writing in the Cambridge exams, whether CAE or CPE, whether essay, letter, article, report, whatever. These are the 4 ways that your writing gets marked. So first of all, let's start with the content. They actually gave this a full 5 out of 5. They said that they discussed 2 of the options, which is what they were asked to do. It also presented one of them as being better. Their critique here, or their feedback, even though this person got 5 out of 5, they did mention that the essay is slightly unbalanced, focused mainly on sports centers. However, that's kind of justified by the essay, because it starts by saying, let me start with the sports centers, as I think these are a bit more problematic. So by giving that hint saying that I think sports centers are a bit more problematic, I guess Cambridge is kind of being nice here and saying, okay, well, you can have a little bit more time to explain why they're problematic in detail. And I'll be honest, I'm a little bit shocked that they gave it this 5 out of 5. I would have said 4 out of 5 because the parks really didn't get a lot of explanation. There wasn't a lot of content or detail. However, I guess Cambridge is being nice because this person used the sentence, regarding of the green spaces, the situation is much clearer. Essentially setting themselves up to say, I don't need to talk about the parks as much because it's a simpler issue. So in this case, Cambridge gave them 5 out of 5. Now, if we look at the communicative achievement, the register and the tone are consistent. So again, remember this idea of register being the balance between formal and informal. Formal being, very nice sounding, professional sounding, and informal being more the way that you would talk with friends, for example. Now, the Cambridge folks here have said that this is definitely consistent throughout, and it doesn't name exactly where it is, but I'd say this is somewhere kind of in the middle. You're addressing an audience, but you're not talking to them like they're your buds on a Friday night. Now, the one critique that the Cambridge examiners have here, the person who wrote this has relied a lot on their own personal opinion, rather than balancing that with some objective opinion based on the way how a lot of people see something. So here's a little hint for you, or something to keep in mind to get the maximum marks for communicative achievement. You want to present both your own personal opinion to back up an idea and also a more generally accepted opinion. So what I mean by this is to share what you think about it, as this person did in theirs, their own critiques of sports centers, but then also bring in sort of the group's opinion on this. And I would say if you do only your opinion, Cambridge will ding you a little bit like they did here. And if you only talk about general ideas, they might also ding you as well. So just try to balance a bit of your own opinion and, something about how, many people think this, or many people my age think this, or many people, my parents' generation think this. Some kind of thing where you're bringing in more opinions than just your own idea. And one other thing you bring in here are actual facts. If, for example, the prompt is asking you to talk about something that you are quite knowledgeable about, or maybe you've done a project on, and you can bring some actual statistics into this, by all means, go for that. That brings a little bit more of that objectivity and a little bit less of that subjectivity. And the Cambridge examiners point this out by, pointing out the fact that this person used sentences like, I would like to write a few of my personal thoughts. I think these are the problem I see. So you see that first person pronoun of using I? I guess that might be the little indicator here. If you're using I for everything, you're probably using too much of your own opinion. Maybe bring in a second person pronoun like we, or bring in that third person perspective of it or its, so that you're talking about something beyond just your own opinion. And they say that here. Their feedback from Cambridge says, a more objective approach would have been more suited to this essay task, which is to discuss the idea in general terms rather than in your own personal experience. But they still give them 4 to 5. So they're not saying you were way off, just more objectivity would have been better suited for this task. Let's move on to the organization now. They say that this essay is well organized, it is coherent, different ideas are clearly signposted, basically meaning that anytime you're switching what you're talking about, you've got some kind of transition words. Now, we will discuss transition words, how to move between paragraphs in a later video, but they point out some of the examples here. The paragraphs or the sections with ideas start with, let me start with, therefore, another reason, regarding. So this helps the reader follow along and to know that there are transitions happening and you're linking ideas together. However, this is where Cambridge did ding them a little bit. You've got that massive second paragraph, which is a good paragraph. However, there's an imbalance between the third paragraph. So again, I guess that's something to keep in mind. You're not saying that every paragraph has to be totally uniform and exactly the same, but if one is much longer than the other, you're likely going to get dinged a little bit here, which is, in my opinion, the reason that Cambridge awarded 4 out of 5 points rather than a full 5 out of 5 for organization. Finally, let's move on to language. So Cambridge here says, yeah, a wide range of vocabulary was used, including some less common words, and it was used fairly effectively. However, remember in my original video, I said what Cambridge is looking for from you is a wide variety of vocabulary and grammar. However, they're not just looking for variety, they also want accuracy, or how precise you are being. So for example, Cambridge points out, we have to balance that shift in our lifestyles. Balance and shift and lifestyles, those 3 words, at first they make sense, you know what the person's trying to say, but those aren't the most precise words. You don't balance a shift. Maybe you manage a shift, or you make a transition and shift in our lifestyles, but you don't balance a shift. Cambridge goes on to highlight a few of the strong grammatical forms that were used quite well. Obviously, in our times where lots of people spend days sitting in their office staring at a computer, some sort of physical training is very important. That's great. However, there are little errors throughout this. They're often just little slip-ups, and we still figure out what the person's trying to say. However, this is really important. Once you have written your work, please go back through and reread it and look for those little errors. You know, myself as a native speaker and even as an English teacher, I have to go back through and read my emails that I send to people because maybe there's a missing word. Or, you know, I had edited something and I cut and pasted a sentence a little bit, but then I never actually finished doing it correctly. And, you know, I'm kind of shocked that in this high-level Cambridge example, you know, there are a few mistakes. For example, you can do at these days. Doesn't make sense. There is almost countless list. I think they mean there is almost a countless list. So it's just little things like a missing word in a sentence that will ding you, and essentially is why this person did not receive the full 5 out of 5 for language, but received 4 out of 5 for language. So I've now gone through candidate C in your resource material. There are 2 other sample essays, and this would be my little project for you now. I would like you to go back through and read candidate A's essay and candidate B's essay. And Cambridge has provided their breakdown of their scale for content, communicative, achievement, organization, and language. And what I like about candidate A's essay is they did a great job on content, but much less so on communicative, achievement, organization, and not very well on language. For sample B or candidate B, I like this because they kind of did okay on everything. They got a 3 in content, 4 in communicative achievement, 4 in organization, and a 3 in language. So overall, it's not bad, but it's also not great. I hope now that we've gone through this example that Cambridge calls quite strong with just 4s and 5s, if you go back and look at these kind of weaker essays, they're not bad, but they're not as strong. Hopefully you'll begin to build a little bit of discernment or ability to pick apart what makes a good, an okay, and a not so strong essay in terms of those 4 areas of content, communicative, achievement, organization, and language. And I'd really recommend spending some time looking through these essays and understanding a little bit more about what Cambridge is looking for before you start to write your own. So in the next video, we will talk about one of the model questions, and I will work through with you to plan a really good example, and we'll create a really good example together. And then finally, I'll present an idea where I just give you the topic and you go for it. So your little bit of homework from this video, please go back through and read candidate A and candidate B's answer and see what you notice about them, and maybe talk with a fellow friend or student about what you see here, and maybe even how you would have approached these essays differently. I hope this has been helpful, and I wish you a really good day.